Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and run this at regular speed. Here we have a nice throttle to the tunnel. And I know you can't hear the audio, but I can. So what part of the confusion that comes here on this turn is as the dog is taking off, it is not enough to be facing toward the dog. So a lot of people feel that this should turn the dog, but actually as the dog takes off, which is right here, before the dog takes off, they need to know where they're going. And if I wiggle this back and forth, you can see the dog's moving this way. So the next question is, what is the handler doing? So if I wiggle it back and forth, you can see that the handler is moving forward. Yes, you're starting to turn backwards, but your momentum is forward. And so what that tells the dog is they need to take this jump in extension, and the most likely next jump is yellow. Then when the dog is in the air, you're still moving a little bit backwards, and you're still moving backwards. So when I look at it here, I can tell you're moving backwards because your head disappears behind the post. So everything about your body says to take that jump, and then you end up calling the dog. So I don't think this is the dog's fault. What happens is, on a front cross, I want you to draw a line from this wing to the teeter. So we draw a line there. And when you front cross, that's where I want you to front cross, somewhere on that line. If you go over that line, you create the possibility for lots of wide turns, like this. But if you front cross over here, then there's really only one way to get to the teeter, and it's a nice tight turn. So there's this backwards drifting that you can fix just by coming in, decelerating, meaning slow down, and then do your front cross right here. All right, here we're sending the dog. This is fine. Okay, the dog stops because the dog is unsure of the end contact behavior. 99 times out of 100, the dog does not understand the criteria. The other one time, it's due to stress or something in the environment, like birds up in the rafters. And then they just want to be in a high spot so they can see things better. So here, when dogs do this, I basically ignore them because this is a failure to perform to criteria. And so in practice, I would not even try and get the dog to come down. If the dog does this in practice and then you have them come down and then you reinforce them, then they're going to do this because this is part of everything that's being reinforced. So whenever this happens, I just call them off. I release them. I say, okay, then we're going to do the whole dog walk again, and then this time if they get it without stopping, as soon as they get in the 2-on 2-off position, I mark it, I say yes, and then I treat. But anytime the dog does this, it is immediate non-reward. I do not help the dog. I do not give the cue again. And there is no possibility of reinforcement, even if they get the 2-on 2-off perfectly once they have stopped like this. And this is very critical for how you train. You cannot reward this ever, or you will continue to get this behavior in a trial. All right? So if the dog doesn't want to come off, yeah, I would just release them. But I would not go on to this next one. I would just say, okay, and then I would pause here and then put them on the table. This way the dog understands we didn't do the right behavior. I'm asking you to come off of it. I'm releasing you, okay, and then we're going to pause here because I can't give you your immediate reward, which is the next obstacle. And now we can go to the next obstacle after this delay. All right, in severe cases, I would even pull the dog off course. Okay, so once the dog gets here, 2-on 2-off perfectly, I like to immediately reinforce. Like, this is taking too much time. We really don't need to wait that long. We want the dog to move very quickly into position on the dog walk. Okay, so now once the dog makes a mistake, we don't want to use no reward markers. You mentioned it in the email that you were a little bit embarrassed about it. It happens, you know, in the heat of the moment, you're upset, you look back at the video and maybe you overreacted a little bit, but we want to avoid no reward marks. That generally lowers the drive of dogs, especially sensitive dogs. Here the dog gets it correctly, gets it correct, and so you have a really good thing that you did here, and you said yes, and then you went on. So by marking it with the yes, that's what I'm wanting on the dog walk contacts, anywhere there's an issue. And here you have a beautiful run through. Now you did mention about the table. Oh, okay, so this table was okay. Yeah, so if they refuse the table, one thing to remember on the table is don't meet your dog at the table. So for example, let's say the dog's going like this and they need to turn to the table. A lot of times the handler will just run to the table. But if they run to the table, the dog should parallel you and actually go around the table or beyond the table, and then you have to call them back because they want to parallel your line. So how should I handle this then? Well, in order to get that turn, I need to create that turn. So I need to do this. That will create a parallel line to the table. Then once the dog gets on, now I can walk over to the table and stand wherever I need to, depending on what obstacle is next. Does that make sense? So it may be that you're inadvertently causing refusals on the table with your handling. I'm not sure. Go ahead and submit videos of any of that, any table refusals when they happen. All right. 10th pole popping. If she is consistently doing it in practice, meaning in practice she is 100% correct, always does all 12, and this only happens in trials, that means in trials you're going to have to do a one shot only. So I know you can do the weaves up to 3 times, but if she misses, you're going to have to leave. And at that point the dog will realize that they have to get it on the first try or it's not going to happen. Right? Because right now it may be that the dog thinks, well, I can always miss it because I'm always going to get a chance to do it again. And a lot of times when we do it again, it's going to be an easier entry, a slower entry speed. It's just going to be much better for me. And so we don't want the dog thinking that they can do that. All right. So it may be that you need to leave the ring. It depends how often it's going on and how much proofing you've done in practice. So number one, I would say you got to proof in practice to a very high degree. And then once you've built a lot of value there, now you can take it to the trial environment and say, okay, I know you can do this. We've been doing this in practice and now you're not doing it. Well, it's not because they're being willful or disobedient. It's because of the reinforcement history, right? You're always giving the dog a second chance. So we have to take away that second chance. So hopefully all of this makes sense. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Great job.